David Evans is a leading carbon modeller and mathematician. David was the key modeller. He designed our carbon accounting model to meet the Kyoto commitments. He's one of a team of 4 experts who Senator Fielding took to see Penny Wong, good luck, to get answers prior to a vote on the ETS in 2009. He has 6 degrees, including 3 from Stanford University. He worked for the Australian Greenhouse Office as their leading carbon modeller. David has spoken in New York, Washington, and he's toured with Lord Christopher Monckton in 2011. Would you welcome, please, Dr. David Evans.
Ladies and gentlemen, global warming has become a scam. Let me explain how it works. It has superficial plausibility. Yes, global warming is occurring. Yes, carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas and levels are rising. Yes, every molecule of carbon dioxide we emit causes some warming. Many non-scientists think that proves the case, but it doesn't. In particular, it does not rule out the possibility that carbon dioxide is merely a minor or insignificant player, and that something else is the main cause of global warming. Here's a clue. The world has been in a warming trend since 1680, over 300 years ago, the depth of the Little Ice Age. It has warmed steadily since then, at about ½ degree per century. Within the trend, there is a pattern of 25 to 30 years of warming, followed by 25 to 30 years of cooling, mild cooling. We have just finished a warming period that started in 1975, so chances are we will have mild cooling for the next decade or two. There were no SUVs in 1680. Human emissions of CO2 were minuscule before 1850. Nearly all of them come after World War II, and a quarter have come since 1998. Yet the warming trend was as strong in the 1700s and 1800s as it was in the 1900s. The theory of man-made global warming does not even stand up to casual scrutiny. It requires believers to ignore or deny overwhelming evidence that it is bunk. The believers have to be schooled by massive propaganda not to notice certain things and to ignore and revile those who point out those things. There is, in fact, no empirical evidence that global warming is mainly man-made. None. If there was, we would have heard all about it. Billions of dollars have been spent trying to find that evidence. Climate scientists readily concede that there is no direct evidence that global warming is caused by our carbon dioxide. Instead, they say that our knowledge of how the climate works is embodied in their climate models, and that the climate models say that the global warming is man-made. Now, models are logically equivalent to someone punching in numbers in a calculator and doing sums on a calculator. Very quickly, I might add. Models are calculations, not evidence. The problem is that the models contain a lot of guesses, a lot of assumptions, and some of those are wrong. Here are 4 bits of evidence that the climate models are fundamentally flawed. First, they have a track record of greatly exaggerating temperature increases. The global warming scare was started by James Hansen in his presentation to the US Congress in 1988, and comparing his predictions then to what has subsequently occurred in the last 22 years, the actual temperature rises are about 1/3 of what he said they would be. Remember, they have been saying the science is settled since the early 80s, and the models now are essentially the same as James Hansen used back then. Furthermore, Hansen's model predicted that the temperature rise, if human carbon dioxide emissions were cut back drastically starting in 1998, such that carbon dioxide by the year 2000 was not rising at all. In reality, the temperatures didn't even rise as much as he predicted under that scenario, which proves that the climate models don't have a clue about the effect of carbon dioxide on world temperature. Second, the climate models predicted the oceans should be warming. We've only been measuring ocean temperature properly since 2003 using the Argo system. In Argo, a buoy duck dives down to 2,000 metres and slowly rises, measures the temperature, radios the result back to a satellite to HQ. The 3,000 Argo buoys patrol the oceans constantly. They say that the ocean temperature since 2003 has been basically flat. Again, reality is very different from what the climate models say. Third, the climate models predict a particular pattern of atmospheric warming during periods of global warming. In particular, the most prominent change they predict is a warming in the tropics, about 10 kilometres up, the so-called hotspot. But we've been measuring atmospheric temperatures by weather balloons since the 1960s, and millions of weather balloons say there was no such hotspot during the last warming from 75 through 2001. Now, the hotspot is integral to their theory, because it would be evidence of the extra evaporation and thickening of the water vapour blanket that produces 2/3 of the warming in the climate models. The carbon dioxide itself only produces 1/3 of their projected warming, but it is amplified in the models by water vapour. In reality, there is no hotspot, therefore there is no amplification, which is why the climate models have exaggerated temperature increase. By the way, that became known by the mid-1990s. So the theory of man-made global warming should have been abandoned then. But there was too much money, bureaucracy, ideology, bank trading profits and renewables action for the gravy train to be shut down. Fourth, satellites have measured the outgoing radiation from the Earth and found that the Earth gives off more heat when the surface is warmer and less heat in the months when the Earth's surface is cooler. Would you have guessed? But the climate models say the opposite. They say that the Earth gives off less heat when the surface is warmer because they trap heat too aggressively. Again, the climate models are violently at odds with reality. Now, these are four pieces of evidence that the climate models are fundamentally flawed. Any one of them, by itself, disproves the climate models, and therefore the theory of man-made global warming. Remember, there's no direct evidence that man causes global warming, so if the climate models are wrong, then the theory's wrong. There are also more pieces of evidence, but they're too complicated for this speech. Now, let me explain how they prevent this scam from being revealed. The trick is that they never put any alarmist climate scientist in a position where they have to answer to a knowledgeable critic. To defend their theory in public, the alarmist climate scientists typically send up people like Tim Flannery or Tony Jones, who know next to nothing about how climate models work. Then, when confronted with evidence, these believers immediately just say, "Oh, but the climate scientists say such and such." They argue from authority. This argument has the same structure as the celebrated argument between Galileo and the Pope. Evidence on one side, and massive political and religious authority on the other. Note that the Pope had scientists on his side too. In fact, the overwhelming majority, and they were the consensus. It's easy to manufacture a consensus when you have that much power and money. Alarmist climate scientists do make public appearances, but never in a situation where they come under sustained questioning or criticism from anyone who understands the models. They have avoided any real debate in public for decades. These alarmists have never been held accountable. They've never had to answer to people who knew the problems with their theories. They've never faced an audit, an inquiry, a royal commission, or even a hostile interview. Yet they get paid megabucks of your money and presume to tell the rest of us how to live their lives. The alarmist government climate scientists say they only respond to what is in peer-reviewed journals. But that cover was memorably blown in the ClimateGate scandal of 2009, which revealed in their own words that they rigged the journals to prevent publication of any criticism. That's why they go on and on about peer review. It's their mechanism for keeping out criticism. The climate scientists and their believer acolytes, by the way, are more than happy to argue with unknowledgeable critics. Critics who know something's wrong but don't quite have the background or understanding of the models to know where the weaknesses really are. The climate scientists delight in being more knowledgeable than all scientific against uninformed criticism because it makes them feel like real scientists instead of charlatans. And it's great PR for their cause. There is something very religious and medieval about all of this. Galileo's case led to the Enlightenment, in which evidence came to triumph over political authority. In enlightened society, people did not have to believe something just because some political or religious authority said so. The evidence determines what is considered generally true. But on climate, our society is reversing the Enlightenment, slipping back towards the Middle Ages. Sure, we have smartphones, but our means of determining truth has reverted to political authority and their pet scientists declaring what is true, denying the evidence, and reviling the unbelievers. It gets worse. There are kids under feet. Not only... No, it's in the speech, really. It gets worse. Not only are we reversing the values of the Enlightenment, we are deindustrialising. These scam artists, led by those technological buffoons, the Greens, want us to close down our cheap and reliable sources of power and go back to using unreliable and intermittent windmills. Like in the Middle Ages, we would be at the mercy of the breezes, using muscle power where possible. These people pride themselves on being progressive, which, like everything else on this topic, is a fully sick parody of the truth. Now, this corruption has to end. We have repeatedly called for a Royal Commission into the science before taking action, and of course we were ignored. So now I'm calling for a debate. Professor Andy Pittman is the leading climate scientist in Australia. Andy has about 20 PhD students working for him and has had millions of dollars of research funding, and he holds lots of prestigious positions in the climate establishment. He recently refused to debate William Kninmouth and me in the usual dismissive way. I won't debate people who don't believe in gravity. Kninmouth was head of Australia's National Climate Centre for 12 years and spent 38 years at the Australian Bureau of Meteorology. So, Andy, come and debate us. You say the evidence for man-made global warming is overwhelming, so it should be easy for you. What's the problem? The Australian taxpayer looks after you extremely well, so the least you should have to do is explain yourself once in a while. The government and the ALP might find such a debate very interesting. Let me finish with what I said in the Australian newspaper in 2008. Quote, "What is going to happen over the next decade as global temperatures continue not to rise? The Labor government is about to deliberately wreck the economy in order to reduce carbon emissions. If the reasons later turn out to be bogus, the electorate is not going to re-elect a Labor government for a long time." When it comes to light that the carbon scare was known to be bogus in 2008, the ALP is going to be regarded as criminally negligent or ideologically stupid for not having seen through it. Thank you.